First of all, thank you for having me here. It's very hard to follow me now, but I just want to start talking about, I asked myself a question when I was invited here is, can aesthetic disarm oppression? And the first thing I want to say is there are many kind of artists. And we tend to privilege one kind of artist over another kind of artist when we are activists, when we are people in the art world. So depending on our own interests, we have this kind of preference. I think that is a mistake. I think we should embrace everybody and trying to make them go to the directions of conscientiousness and commitment that we need to change the world. But in this case, I'm going to talk about what I do, because I know that best. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some strategies I have used in my work. One of the first things I've done is to try to rethink what an artist does. And try to rethink how can an artist influence other aspects, other disciplines, other communities, other environments. But also, and in this case, I have come up with the idea, I identify myself not as an author, but as an initiator. Why? Because I think it's important that we start recognizing as people in the arts that all the work is not done by us, that we are only the person who maybe push one subject or maybe invite people to join us in a conversation, but we are not responsible of all the outcomes of the work, and we have to give credit to the people involved. So this is one thing. The other thing I'm very interested in this idea of artivism. Why? Because I think I'm also very interested in the role art has in society. Start thinking about art not as production, but start thinking about art as implementation. So in this case, I think we need, as artists, to start collaborating with you guys, activists, and in a very codo a codo, like we say in Spanish, arm to arm, and start understanding the differences, and start also pushing for the ways in which aesthetics can challenge political imaginaries. Because sometimes in activism, I have encountered very concrete modes of operation. I have worked for many, many years, and I think as artists we have the duty of challenge those as well. So another thing I feel is important in order for aesthetics to play a role is to understand the difference in terms of the temporality of your actions. Many artists, many actions are effective when they are done quick and dirty, but many actions have to be done with care, trust, and time. Sometimes you need to develop an audience before you do the work. Sometimes you need to invest in the time for people to understand how to enter a difficult issue, to start having the conversation. So one of the things I have used in my work is the idea of active hyperrealism. What I mean by that is that I give more importance to gesture than to images. What I mean by that is I'm using behavior, our everyday behavior, as material for the work, as a way to rethink how we are in this time, in this place. So in this case, I also feel that one thing that disrupts very much people in power is when you are not pretending to be something, but you are the thing you want to be. Because they don't know how to respond to that. They're used to you asking permission. They're used for you to go the way they want you to go. So I think it's important to start acting in ways that they understand you are not playing a play, but you are actually living your life in that way. So they have to deal with you in terms of laws and civic in that sense. Another thing that is very important is the idea of institutional self-critique. I feel like as artists working in this political and social engaged medium, we need to do actions that actually make the institution reflect into itself. I think, as many people have said today, that we are in a time where the moment has arrived for us to take institutions. We need to stop talking about institutions. We have to take them and start doing things. But we need to start taking them by telling them they are not right. So what do we have to do? We have to move from criticism to productive self-criticism, in which we can tell them how we want things to happen. So in that sense, I feel like art needs to be one of these elements that, yes, let you think about how you want to imagine things, but also has to be integrated in people's everyday life. It cannot be an activity that is remote. It cannot be an activity for certain people who are elected and selected. It should be for everybody. Of course, there is always the problem of urgency versus agency. And sometimes it's very small change, but I think it's very important to understand when the work needs to be done. We need to stop thinking as artists that we want to do the work we think is important for us, but we need to understand when the work is important to be done and when it's important to stop. Because sometimes also we create institutions, there are fake institutions, we go and go. Sometimes you don't need to do the work. We need to start understanding what is the urgency the art responds to. And also, how can you intervene in the political timing of your moment? Not only as a comment after the fact, like, oh, you see a news, and okay, you react. That's the kind of traditional way people do art. We need to start infiltrating the changing makers. And we need to start infiltrating the government. We need to start infiltrating places where politics and policies are being made. Because we need to start changing the affect that we feel, like political affect, for political effectiveness. Another thing, of course, we have to do is try to ask questions like, why people in this election are having billions of dollars in a stupid brainwashing seconds interfere in our life when that money could be for paying people's student loans. So we need, as artists, to start asking, stop asking and start pushing for these things to happen. And I think one of these ways is to rethink how we collaborate with each other. Another thing is, I think we need to look at the law. I think the moment also has arrived for us to take the law in our hands, not to be followed, but to be readdressed, written, and to be rethought. Why? Because the law has not been made for us. The law has been made to defend other people's interests. So we need to start understanding how policy has forgotten social justice. And we need to recuperate that space. And as artists, the way I address this is, me and many artists, is through something we call arte útil, or art as a tool, or useful art, which is rechanging the purposes of things. And of course, aesthetic is the area we deal with. And I want to say one thing. Aesthetics has a long history. But people in governments, people in power, only know a very tiny part of that history. That's our advantage. So I think one of the things we should do is to start doing art and to do activist actions that people in power don't understand. We need to start doing aesthetic actions they are confused by. You know? Why? Because that gives us time. That gives us time to act. By the time they are figuring out what's going on, we have already done our job. And, and I also think it is important because it pushes them to think differently. It's also an exercise to push people in power to start thinking differently about what they're doing and making them understand they don't know everything. You know? So I think, actually, I wrote it here because I have bad memory. I think that we can do with art, I think also one thing that is very important is to to put back ethics into our production. I think sometimes we oversee ethics. We think just because we're doing the right subject or working with the right community, we are ethics. I think we need to rethink what ethics means at this time for us. And I think, and just to finish, I think art can transform ethics in public politics. And we have to use art. But before using art, use the privilege all of you had, which is vote. So November 8th, go and vote. Thanks.